If you love painting watercolor flowers but are never sure how to make them into a larger painting, that's exactly what I'm here to help with, so keep watching. Hello friends, what's up? Welcome back. My name is Shayda Campbell, and on this channel we get creative together. We're gonna dive into a project in just a second, but while I have your attention, while I have you here, I would like to ask you to subscribe. Yes, it's so simple. Just hit that subscribe button. We are getting so close to 1 million subscribers, and that's crazy. And I want your help in getting there, in achieving that milestone. Over the past few years, we've built this into a really great community. This is an artistic community, a supportive community, and that's all because of you guys and your kindness in the comments. I so appreciate that. And if you love these tutorials, I would really appreciate it if you would just take a sec and hit that subscribe button. So help us hit 1 million like tomorrow. So go ahead and subscribe and let's get started. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to design and lay out a watercolor floral. Here's what's up. Step 1, we're going to create a guide, a really simple guide. Step 2, we're going to refine that guide. So choose our flowers, think about what we want to paint, think about the detail and the shape. And step 3, we are going to transfer our guide or our design, and we're going to paint it out in beautiful watercolors. I think this process will help you go from blank page to a beautiful painting, so let's get started. For this project, the supplies that you use aren't super important, but I'm going to show you what I'm using. You definitely want some scrap paper or a cheap sketchbook, whatever you like to sketch in. And then you'll want watercolor paper, of course, for your finished product, as well as watercolor paints. But whatever paints and paper you have, that's not super important. Use what you're used to. We're going to start in that sketchbook, though. You'll want a pencil, eraser, and pen. And then remember, watercolor paints and paper for afterwards. Okay, let's design a watercolor painting together. We're going to start with a rough guide, working in pencil for that rough guide. So I always begin with the shape, and for this one I'm doing an arch, so I'm just starting with a curving line. And then I start thinking about the flowers. A large circle indicates a large flower, medium circle or oval indicates a medium-sized flower. From there I'll add some smaller flowers. I'll also add some lines to kind of indicate, okay, maybe I'm going to put like a long flower there, like a bit of lavender or a leaf. And then I just start filling in all my little nooks and crannies with leaves of different sizes. So that is my basic process for my rough guide. It's always the same. Begin with the shape, then add the flowers, then the leaves. Rough guide done. Okay, moving on to step 2 and working in pen now, I am going to refine my guide. At this point, you want to add detail to your flowers. You may or may not have thought already about what types of flowers you'd like to paint. If you haven't thought about it, start to choose. I'm choosing poppies and roses, keeping it really simple. But if you did your guide with a bunch of medium-sized circles and some lines, maybe you already knew I'm going to paint daisies and lavender. So wherever I've got a circle, it's a daisy. Wherever I've got a line, it's a bit of lavender. For me, I just knew the sizes, and now I'm going in and filling them in, deciding, okay, these are going to be roses, these are going to be poppies. I've got 1 large poppy, 1 medium size, 2 medium sized roses, some tiny little scribbly flowers that are kind of nondescript, and then a bunch of different shapes and sizes of leaves. So that is my guide refined. Now I know exactly what I'll be painting. I've planned the shape of my overall painting and the types of flowers. It's one thing to watch me do it, I know, but it's another thing entirely to do this yourself. So what we're gonna do is another example. I think examples are so key when you're learning. So for this one, I'm starting back at step 1 in pencil, making a rough guide. It's gonna be an oval shape. Last one was an arch. This is an oval, starting with 2 large flowers this time instead of 1. Then 1 medium-sized flower. and then a bunch of smaller flowers there. So right now I've got 2 large flowers, 1 medium, and 3 small. Then same kind of flow here. I'm starting to tuck leaves of different sizes and shapes in all my little corners and nooks and crannies. And there's my basic guide. It's not a long process really when you get into it. Then coming in here with a marker or pen, you're going to start figuring out what kind of flowers do you want to paint. For my 2 large ones that are kind of the center focus of the painting, I'm doing 2 large open peonies. And then I'll actually make 2 of the smaller flowers peony buds, so it all kind of works together. From there, I've got kind of a smallish rose, or they're kind of medium-sized roses. Just, kind of figuring out what leaves. I've got some medium-sized leaves, some smaller, more delicate leaves, and maybe some super tiny leaves. So there is my oval-shaped guide done. Flowers are figured out. Now I've got 2 paintings prepped. I can think a little bit about color, but other than that, I'm ready to get painting. All I need to do now is transfer. In order to take my finished design from sketchpad to watercolor paper, I have 2 methods that I follow. One is a lot more technical, and that's the first one I'm going to show you now. I use a piece of tracing paper, and I just put it over the design, grab a pen or fine liner. We're going to go over the entirety of this design. That's what you see me doing now. So simple enough. Then we're going to take that transfer. You can see what it looks like. I just did it pretty rough. I don't need it to be perfect. We're going to flip it over. So now it's in the reverse. And then you're going to take a pencil and cover the back of that trace with some graphite. And that's going to help you transfer it into your watercolor paper or into your watercolor sketchbook. Here I'm working on Arches cold pressed paper. I've used a little bit of tape to tape the design in so it doesn't move when I'm tracing over it and transferring it. And I'm just going over it with a nice sharp mechanical pencil. And you can see there is the beginning of my transfer. You can transfer as many details as you want. Sometimes for leaves, I just put little lines indicating where I want to paint them. Flowers, I'll just do a circle. I find that frees me up to paint more loosely. Now that that's all ready to paint, here's my other slightly less technical way of transferring a guide. I am working in my Strathmore sketchbook. It's watercolor paper, 140 pound. And this arch design, I am simply going to transfer by looking at it. So I've already done the guide. I know exactly what I want to paint, and I'm going to keep it right there and just refer to it as I paint. It's a great approach if you like to keep it loose and you don't want those lines boxing you in. If any of this is feeling a little bit much or overwhelming, I did create a worksheet to go with this video. Yes, there's a worksheet on Patreon. That's where I give all the bonus content. There's something new every week, and it all starts at $2 a month. So patrons, check out the worksheet after today's video. If you're not a patron, consider supporting the channel. Patreon.com/Shayda Campbell. Link is in the description below. Okay, let's paint. I'm going to start with my first example, the arch. And if I am transferring in this way where I'm just looking at the design, referring to it, I've got it right there on the desk, what I'll typically do is start with the largest flower. And for this painting, that's that big open kind of 5-petal flower sitting right in the middle. So I'm starting with that guy. And then I've got this other kind of poppy looking thing. These are very loose florals. We're not getting into too detailed painting today. We're just keeping it simple, talking about design. So I've done that second sort of medium-sized flower. And then once you've got 2 on the page, it gets a lot easier. So now I've created this sort of corner there where these 2 flowers meet, and I know I'm going to tuck a rose in that area. So that makes it really easy. Like, okay, now I know where that rose is supposed to go. So we'll add him in. And then I've got another rose kind of sitting along that arch on the opposite side of those flowers. And so now all of a sudden I've got 4 flowers sitting here and they're looking pretty good. Transferring this way, you're either going to love it or hate it. I will say that. You might find like, whoa, I painted one way too big and one way too small. If you don't like it, transfer the other way using the tracing paper. But I think some people are really going to dislike doing it that way because it kind of boxes you in. And if you love to paint really loose, it can feel a bit like, oh, I've got these outlines here and I don't really like that. But honestly, this way, once you've got some of your flowers placed, your main flowers placed, then all you're doing is looking at your design and you can say, okay, I did 3 leaves here, 2 leaves over here, and you can continue to constantly refer to the guide. At this point, I can see I need to do my 3 little mini flowers, or you can kind of let it get off the rails at a certain point. You might say like, okay, this design is looking good. I like the way the main flowers are sitting on the page. Now I don't actually require my guide as much as I did in the beginning, and you can kind of let the painting go where it wants to, so to speak. At this point, what I want to do is add a little bit of dark brown there to kind of bring those flowers to life. So doing a bit of lines and dotting for the stamens. Then I'm going back and adding more of the leaves. These leaves are all a part of my guide. You can see both the sketch and the painting in most of these shots. And, you know, once most of those leaves and flowers are on the paper, then you're just adding those detail elements like the dark brown stamens, maybe adding a little bit of darker pink at the center of some of the flowers, maybe adding just a hint of dark green to some of the leaves. You know, how much detail you want to add is up to you. And this really isn't so much about the technique of painting these flowers, but it's really about how I go from, you know, designing a painting to getting it onto the page and actually finishing it, because that's the real trick. And then finally, I just wanted to add a few brown leaves here to kind of finish off my color palette. Those were kind of little extras. And yeah, she's all done. So that is probably a little bit of a trickier way of transferring, just looking at the design. Next, we're going to do it the other way so you can see that process as well. To begin my second painting, I am just testing out a few colors. It's always good to have some scrap paper on hand. You know, try your mixes before you hit the good copy paper. I'm doing a lot of similar colors here. I'm keeping it simple. As I said, this isn't so much about the painting, but how I get to that end result. So I'm keeping things basic with some pink flowers, some green leaves, you know. But for this one, I've got a lot more of a guide to help me through the painting process. So I have a feeling that this transfer might be kind of an approach that is more popular with you, the viewer, and I'm here for it. This one really allows you to, you know, get it right. If you're feeling like, I just can't figure this out, I can never transfer my ideas onto the page, I think this will help you immensely. And of course, you've transferred it with graphite, so you're able to erase any pencil lines that you might not paint over. I've started with the 2 peonies in the center there. They're very loose, just keeping everything loosey-goosey, airy-fairy today as usual. What else is new? And those are a good start. I always tend to start with the large flowers. It's just a great place to begin. If I screw them up, I'm going to know right away so I can start over. And then I've got these cute little peony buds. So I just started with a really light paint and then doing a little wet into wet with darker pink there. Then I just let them dry while I'm doing these really dark minty green leaves. And then once they have dried a little but are not totally dry, I'm going to get a little more wet into wet action there and just allow my green to seep into the pink area. And that just gives that beautiful look of a peony bud. And then we can still add a bit of darker pink. And those I think look really pretty and loose and watery and all that. The dark green is a mix of deep phthalo green with purple, so it gives me that really rich minty color. Over here, I'm using a bit more of an olive brown. So I'm getting some kind of warmer greens as well as those minty cool greens. And just painting in my leaves. Remember, drag that belly of the brush across the page. Use the tip of the round brush to refine your shapes, but for the most part, just leave them alone. Painting some more roses. I always start with a darker color in the center and then get lighter on the edges. Basic way to paint a rose. And I do still have my drawing here. I did want to mention that. I'm still referring to it the way I did in example 1. but I also have the trace or transfer on the paper. So, you've got the best of both worlds in some way with this one. Here's another example of a rose. I've started quite dark in the center, and then I'm using a lighter or more watery paint as I move outward. And remember, you can let things dry and then build up color, darker color on top. So working with wet on dry gives you a ton of precision. If you are still learning to paint watercolor florals and you're like, wow, this is going very quickly, remember, this is not really a painting tutorial. I wanted to show you my entire process, but this one's all about how you get from a sketch to a painting. I have tons of watercolor floral paintings on the channel. There's playlists, check the homepage, I'll link the playlist. But here we go, this is looking pretty good. I've got my design here for reference. I can look at it and say, oh yeah, I was gonna place some tiny little leaves or flowers over here, so why don't we do that? Or, if you missed anything, some things do get lost in the transfer. So that's why you wanna have your initial design still handy. You can refer to it. And I'm doing the same thing here to finish this piece as I did with the first one. I'm just taking some darker colors, adding a little detail to the stamen, adding a bit of darker green on those leaves, and it really makes the whole thing pop and brings the piece to life. Let's take a look at my painting next to the guide. I painted the one peony upside down. I don't know why I did that, but whatever, that's fine. So just a quick refresher. Step 1, make a rough guide. Step 2, refine that guide. And step 3, you're going to transfer your guide or your drawing and you're going to paint it out in beautiful watercolor. I hope you'll find this video helpful. It's one thing to know how to paint flowers. It's another thing to know how to design a painting. Remember, you can grab the worksheet on Patreon. That's there for you patrons. So head over there after today's video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and I'll see you soon.